My dad raises me alone for 18 years, gets replaced at my wedding by stepdad, and he takes drastic action, and There's something about silence when you're alone. It's heavier than when you're surrounded by people. When you're alone, it creeps in and fills every corner of the room. That's how it feels now, sitting here on the couch in my little living room, staring at nothing in particular. I've been here for hours, my mind wandering back to the moments that led me here. I never thought I'd be a single dad, raising a little girl by myself. But life has a way of throwing punches you never see coming. When Lily was 8 years old, her mom walked out on us. I can still remember the day Rachel left. It was a cloudy Saturday morning in the middle of March here in Indianapolis. I woke up to the sound of a slammed door and found Rachel standing in the kitchen with her suitcase by her side. She said something about needing a fresh start, about feeling stuck and suffocated. She looked me dead in the eyes, her expression cold, and said, "I can't do this anymore, David." I didn't understand what this even was. Raising a kid? Being a family? I didn't get it then, and I don't get it now. But she was gone by the time the clock struck noon, and I was left standing in the kitchen with Lily asking me, "Where's Mom?" Her little voice still echoes in my head sometimes. That night, Lily cried herself to sleep. I stayed by her side, my hand resting on her back as I whispered that everything would be okay. I didn't believe it myself, but what else could I say? I promised her we'd figure it out together. That was the first night of what felt like a lifetime of figuring things out on my own. Those early years after Rachel left were a blur. I worked long hours at the repair shop, fixing cars by day and tucking Lily into bed at night. Money was always tight, but we made it work. I stopped going out with friends, stopped doing much of anything outside of work, and being there for Lily. I became dad first, and everything else about me faded into the background. I didn't resent it, though. She was my world, my reason for pushing forward. There are moments from those years that stand out more than others. I remember her first day of middle school. She was nervous, clutching her little backpack with both hands as we stood at the front doors of the school. I kneeled down beside her, looking her straight in the eye. "You're going to do great, kiddo," I told her. "But what if nobody likes me?" she whispered. I smiled and squeezed her hand. "Then they're missing out." She grinned, just a little, and gave me a quick hug before she ran inside. I sat in the car afterward and cried, realizing how much she was growing up and how much I wished Rachel had stayed to see it. But Lily didn't need her. She had me, and I had her. The years rolled by, and we fell into a rhythm. I worked. She grew. I was there for the school plays where she forgot her lines but still smiled through it. I was there for the math test she aced and the days she didn't want to talk about. Every parent-teacher conference, every doctor's visit, every scraped knee and broken heart, I was there. I never missed a thing. When Lily turned 16, Rachel reappeared. Out of nowhere, after nearly 8 years of silence, she called me. She was living in California with her new husband, Mark. "I've changed," she said. "I want to reconnect with Lily. She deserves to have her mom in her life." I didn't know what to say to that. I wanted to yell at her, to tell her she didn't get to come back after leaving us in the dust. But this wasn't about me. It was about Lily. I told her I'd leave it up to our daughter. When I brought it up to Lily, I expected anger or confusion. Instead, she sat quietly on the couch, her hands folded in her lap, thinking it over. "I want to see her," she finally said. "That's what I get for raising a kind kid." She always saw the good in people, even when they didn't deserve it. So Rachel flew in a week later. I still remember standing at the edge of the driveway, watching Lily hug her mom for the first time in years. Rachel looked so polished, so different from the woman who'd walked out. Her smile was bright, her voice soft and full of apologies. And right beside her stood Mark, a tall guy with a warm smile and a strong handshake. I didn't trust it, not for a second, but I let it happen because Lily wanted it, and I wasn't about to stand in the way. The months that followed were strange. Rachel and Mark started showing up more often, making a big effort to be part of Lily's life. Mark seemed harmless enough, polite, friendly, always asking how I was doing and offering a handshake whenever we crossed paths. I couldn't fault him, really, but there was always something nagging at me. He wasn't there for the hard years. He didn't see the nights when Lily cried for her mom, or the days when I worked late just to keep food on the table. But still, he got to swoop in and play the good guy. Over time, I watched as Lily grew closer to Rachel and Mark. I tried not to let it bother me. After all, she was still my little girl. I reminded myself of that every day. Now, fast forward to the present. Lily's 26, and she's getting married. She's been with Chris, her fiancé, for 5 years now. He's a good guy, steady and kind. The sort of man a dad hopes his daughter will end up with. I couldn't be happier for her. I even helped out with the wedding costs, throwing in a big chunk of money to make sure her day was perfect. I thought this wedding would be a celebration of everything we'd been through together. I pictured myself walking her down the aisle, standing beside her as she stepped into this next chapter of her life. I imagined our father-daughter dance, the way we'd laugh as we stumbled through the steps. It wasn't much, but it meant everything to me. I didn't know how wrong I was. Lily and I have this little routine. Every couple of weeks, we grab dinner at a small diner a few blocks from my house. Nothing fancy, just two people who've been close for a long time, catching up over burgers and fries. That night, I sat across from her in our usual booth. The place had the same faded green vinyl seats and flickering light above the jukebox that had been there for years. It wasn't much, but it was ours. She looked happy. Her eyes lit up as she talked about the wedding, flipping through ideas for centerpieces and desserts on her phone. I listened, nodding along, throwing in the occasional "sounds great" or "Chris will love that." She'd been with Chris for 5 years now, and I liked him. He was steady, level-headed, the kind of guy a dad hopes for when it comes to his daughter. I couldn't have asked for better. Lily paused, brushing her hair back, and looked at me with that serious expression she gets when she's trying to say something important. I thought she was about to ask for my opinion on table linens or invite me to check out another overpriced wedding venue. "Dad," she said, her voice soft but clear, "I wanted to talk to you about the ceremony." I smiled, ready for whatever she had in mind. "Sure, what's up?" She hesitated, her eyes flickering down to her hands, which were fiddling with the edge of her napkin. I want Mark to walk me down the aisle." At first, I didn't process it. I blinked and laughed, thinking maybe she was joking. "Wait, what? Mark?" I asked, my tone light, trying to keep the mood from changing. She didn't laugh. Her face stayed serious. "Yeah, I think it would be nice. He's been a big part of my life, too." Her words hung in the air between us like a thick fog. I stared at her, feeling like someone had just pulled the ground out from under me. It didn't make sense. This was supposed to be my moment. I had pictured it 100 times over the years, walking her down that aisle, standing beside her as she stepped into the next chapter of her life. I forced a smile, trying to sound calm. "You want Mark to walk you down the aisle?" I repeated, like maybe I'd heard her wrong. Lily looked me in the eye. "Yeah, Dad. I think it's the right thing to do. He's been part of the family for a long time, and I want everyone to feel included." I sat back against the booth, feeling like the air had been sucked out of the room. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I tried to keep my voice steady, even though my mind was racing. "Lily, I don't know what to say. I thought that was my role." She sighed, clearly uncomfortable. "I know, and I don't want this to hurt you. But Mark has been there for me too. I feel like it's the best way to include everyone." I looked at her, searching for something in her face that might explain this. Did she really believe this? Did she really think this was fair? My chest felt tight, but I didn't want to let it show. I'd spent my whole life trying to protect her from things that hurt. Now here I was, trying not to let her see how much this was tearing me apart. "If that's what you want," I said finally, forcing the words out even though they felt like shards of glass in my throat. Lily seemed relieved, like she'd been bracing herself for me to argue. "Thank you, Dad. I didn't want this to become a big issue." I nodded, keeping my face calm. "It's your day, Lily. I want you to have the wedding you want." We finished dinner, or at least Lily did. I barely touched my food, pushing it around on my plate while she chattered about her dress, the venue, and how much Chris's family was looking forward to the day. I nodded, smiling where I needed to, but my mind was somewhere else. When I got home that night, the silence of the house felt different, heavier, somehow. I sank onto the couch, staring at the blank TV screen, my thoughts spinning. I kept going over everything I'd done for Lily. Every late night, every school event, every scraped knee I'd patched up. I was the one who'd been there. I was the one who stayed when Rachel left. I was the one who worked my fingers to the bone to make sure she never went without. And now, on one of the biggest days of her life, I was being replaced. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind kept replaying her words over and over. Mark has been there for me too. How? Where was he when Lily cried herself to sleep because her mother was gone? Where was he when I sat with her through fevers and bad dreams? Where was he when I worked double shifts just to keep the lights on? He hadn't been there for any of that. The next morning, I called my sister Susan. She answered on the second ring. Hey, Dave. Everything okay? I hesitated for a second before answering. Not really. I need to talk. Susan's always been the one I turn to when things get tough. She's blunt, but she's fair. I told her everything. How Lily wanted Mark to walk her down the aisle. How it felt like a slap in the face after everything I'd done. She was silent for a moment, and then she said, Wait, what? Mark? Are you serious? Yeah, I replied, my voice flat. Dave, no. That's not right. You're her dad. You raised her. How could she even think this is okay? I rubbed a hand over my face. I don't know. She said she wants everyone to feel included. Susan scoffed. Included? That's ridiculous. That's your place, not his. I didn't want to fight her on it, I said quietly. It's her day. I don't want to ruin it for her. David, Susan said firmly, this isn't about ruining her day. It's about respecting everything you've done for her. I don't know what Rachel's been telling her, but this isn't right. Yeah, well, what am I supposed to do? I muttered. If I say anything, I'll look like the bad guy. You know how Rachel is. She'll twist it to make me seem like I'm being selfish. Susan let out a frustrated sigh. That's not fair to you, Dave. You've given up so much for that girl, and she knows it. This isn't about being selfish. It's about what's right. I know, I said, my voice low. But what am I supposed to do? She's made her decision. Susan was quiet for a moment, and then she said, You need to talk to her, Dave. Really talk to her. Make her understand what this means to you. I didn't answer right away. I didn't know if I could do that. Lily had seemed so sure of her decision, so calm when she told me. What if talking to her just made it worse? What if she thought I was trying to guilt her into changing her mind? I'll think about it, I said finally. Don't wait too long, Susan replied. You deserve better than this. After we hung up, I sat in the kitchen, staring at the phone. Susan was right. This wasn't fair. But what was I supposed to do? If I said how I really felt, I'd look like I was trying to ruin her day. If I stayed quiet, I'd be sitting in the crowd watching another man take my place. It didn't feel right either way. The days after my dinner with Lily dragged on like they were never going to end. I'd wake up in the morning thinking about it, and go to bed at night still stewing over it. The hurt sat like a stone in my chest, a weight I couldn't shake. I kept replaying her words in my head. Mark has been there for me too, over and over. One night, a few days later, Rachel called me. I saw her name pop up on my phone and almost let it go to voicemail, but I picked up. I shouldn't have. David, she said, her voice sweet in that way that always meant trouble. Lily told me about your dinner the other night. Of course she did. I gripped the phone tighter. What about it? She mentioned that you didn't seem thrilled when she brought up Mark walking her down the aisle. I wanted to check in and see how you're feeling about everything. Rachel was always good at acting like she was being considerate when, in reality, she was stirring the pot. I took a breath, trying to keep my voice even. I'm fine, I said curtly. It's her wedding. She can do whatever she wants. There was a pause, then her tone shifted, soft and patronizing, the way she always talked when she was trying to get under my skin. David, you don't have to pretend with me. I know this is hard for you, but this is about Lily. She just wants everyone to feel included. That's not unreasonable, is it? I could feel my pulse quicken. She had no right to say that to me. Not after everything she put us through. You don't get to lecture me about Lily, Rachel. You weren't there when she needed you most. You walked away. Her voice sharpened. Don't start with that. I'm here now. I've been part of her life for years, and so has Mark. He's been a great stepfather, and Lily sees that. She wanted this, David, not me. You're the one turning it into an issue. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself not to snap at her. I'm not turning anything into an issue. I told her it's her decision, and I didn't argue. But you don't get to pretend this is just some sweet little family moment, Rachel. You've been whispering things into her ear for years, and you know it. Her tone turned icy. You think so little of me? I'm trying to help Lily have a peaceful, happy wedding. That's all I've ever wanted. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Peaceful, huh? You don't think it's a little strange that the guy who showed up halfway through her life gets the honor of walking her down the aisle, while the one who raised her just sits there? She made the decision, Rachel snapped. Maybe you should respect her enough to accept that instead of blaming me. I clenched the phone so hard my hands started to ache. I couldn't talk to her anymore. Goodbye, Rachel, I said flatly and hung up. I set the phone down on the table and stared at it like it might start ringing again. My head was pounding, my frustration bubbling over. It wasn't enough for Rachel to leave when Lily was a kid. Now she wanted to rewrite history, make herself look like the perfect mom with the perfect new husband, and somehow I was the bad guy for not being thrilled about it. A few minutes later, Susan called. It was like she had some sixth sense for when I was about to lose it. I didn't even say hello when I picked up. Rachel just called me. I muttered. Oh, great, Susan said. What does she want now? To make me look like the problem, as usual, I said bitterly. She's acting like I'm the one turning this into an issue. Like I should just be fine with sitting in the background while Mark gets my moment. Susan let out a frustrated sigh. Of course she is. That's what she does, David. She's been manipulating this whole thing from the start. That's what it feels like, I said. I keep thinking about all those times she wormed her way back into Lily's life and made herself look like the hero. Meanwhile, I'm the one who did the heavy lifting, and nobody sees that. Lily sees it, Susan said firmly. She might not realize it right now, but she knows what you did for her. Don't let Rachel mess with your head. I shook my head, even though Susan couldn't see me. I don't know. I'm starting to feel like I didn't do enough. Like if I had, Lily wouldn't even be considering this. Stop that, Susan snapped. You did everything, Dave. More than most people would. Don't let Rachel twist this into something it's not. This isn't about you failing Lily. This is about Rachel pulling strings and playing nice with her new family. I wanted to believe that, but it didn't make the hurt any less real. What am I supposed to do, Susan? I asked quietly. If I say anything to Lily, I'll look like I'm trying to make her choose between us. If I just sit there at the wedding, I'll feel like I'm being replaced. Susan paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer. Talk to her. Really talk to her, Dave. She might not understand how much this is hurting you. You don't have to yell, and you don't have to make her choose. Just tell her how you feel. She's your daughter. She loves you. I wanted to believe that too, but I didn't know if it was true anymore. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the wall. I thought about all those years of being Lily's dad. All the nights I stayed up late when she was sick, the school recitals where she waved at me from the stage, the mornings when we ate pancakes in our pajamas and laughed about nothing. Mark hadn't been there for any of that. He didn't hold her hand when she cried because Rachel left. He didn't work extra shifts to keep a roof over her head. He didn't sit at the edge of her bed telling her everything would be okay when she wasn't so sure it would. That was me. And now, when it mattered most, I was being pushed aside. I didn't know how to talk to Lily about it. I didn't want to hurt her or make her feel guilty, but I couldn't keep pretending it didn't bother me. I needed her to understand that this wasn't just some small gesture. It wasn't about Mark. It was about everything I'd done, everything I'd been to her. It was about respect. The more I thought about it, the more I realized Susan was right. I had to talk to Lily, and I had to do it soon. I couldn't sit in silence, letting Rachel and Mark take this moment from me without saying a word. The next morning, I picked up the phone and called Lily. My heart was pounding as I waited for her to answer, and when I heard her voice on the other end, I felt a pang of nerves. Hey, Dad, she said cheerfully. What's up? Hey, kiddo, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Can we meet up? Just the two of us. There's something I want to talk about. She paused for a second, probably surprised. Sure. Is everything okay? Yeah, I lied. Just, let me know when you're free. Okay, she said. How about tomorrow evening? Same diner? Sounds good, I said. When I hung up, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. I didn't know how the conversation would go, but I knew I couldn't avoid it any longer. I needed Lily to hear me, really hear me, and I needed to find a way to say everything I'd been holding in without making it worse. I owed it to myself, and I owed it to her. The next evening, I sat in my truck outside the diner, hands gripping the wheel as I stared at the building. It was our diner, where Lily and I had shared so many meals over the years. It used to be a place where I felt nothing but comfort, a place where we'd laugh, joke, and talk about life. Now, it felt different. I could feel the weight of the conversation we were about to have, and it sat heavy on my chest. When I finally got out and walked inside, I spotted her immediately. She was sitting in our usual booth near the window, scrolling through her phone. She looked up when she heard the door chime, smiled, and waved. For a moment, I let myself look at her the way I always had. My little girl, all grown up. The little girl I used to push on the swings and chase through the park was sitting there, ready to plan her wedding, and here I was, barely holding it together. Hey, Dad, she said as I slid into the booth across from her. Hey, kiddo, I replied. A waitress came over, and we ordered 2 coffees and a couple of burgers. Once she walked away, Lily leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. So, what's going on? You sounded a little serious when you called. I nodded, feeling my throat tighten. I didn't want to dive in right away, but there was no point in small talk. I couldn't sit there pretending everything was fine. I need to talk to you about the wedding, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Her expression softened slightly. Oh, she said quietly. I thought we already talked about it. We did, I replied. But I don't think you understand how much this whole thing is bothering me. Lily straightened up, looking at me carefully. Dad, I don't want this to be a big issue. It's just, Mom thought it would be nice to have Mark walk me down the aisle too. He's been part of my life for a long time now. There it was again, Mark. Every time I heard his name, it felt like a punch to the gut. I kept my voice steady, though. I didn't want to yell or say something I couldn't take back. I get that he's been part of your life, but Lily, that's supposed to be my role. I've been there since the day you were born. I've been there through everything, every scraped knee, every tear, every milestone. I've never missed a single moment. I don't understand how you could ask him to take that spot. She frowned and looked down at her hands. I didn't mean to hurt you, Dad, she said softly. It's not about replacing you. I want everyone to feel included. Mom said it's about making the day go smoothly, you know? About having everyone together. Of course, Rachel said that. This had her fingerprints all over it. I clenched my hands under the table to stop them from shaking. Lily, I know what your mom is saying, but I don't think you realize what this means to me. It's not just some small gesture. It's the moment. It's the kind of thing a father dreams about from the time his little girl is born. And now I'm being asked to sit back and watch someone else take it. She flinched a little, like my words stung, but I wasn't going to sugarcoat it. She needed to know how much this hurt. Dad, I just don't want there to be any tension, she said quietly. Mom really wants this to be a happy day, and I'm just trying to do what feels right for everyone. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. Your mom wants a happy day? That's funny, because this has nothing to do with happiness. This is about her wanting her perfect little picture of a united family, and she doesn't care who gets hurt in the process. Don't you see that, Lily? She's been doing this for years, and now you're playing right into it. Lily's face tightened. That's not fair, Dad. Mom has changed. She's trying to do better, and Mark has been really supportive of me. Supportive? I shot back, my voice rising despite myself. Where was Mark when you were crying because she left? Where was he when I worked double shifts to keep food on the table? He wasn't there for the hard years, Lily. I was. Her face fell, and I instantly regretted the sharpness in my tone. I took a deep breath and softened my voice. Look, I'm not trying to guilt you. I just need you to understand why this hurts. I don't want to sit there on your wedding day, watching someone else do the one thing I thought was mine to do. Lily stared at her coffee, stirring it with a spoon even though she hadn't touched it. Her voice was small when she finally spoke. I didn't mean to make you feel like you don't matter. That's not what this is about. But that's how it feels, I said gently. Lily, I've been your dad every day of your life. I don't care how long Mark has been around. He didn't raise you. He didn't sacrifice for you the way I did. And for you to choose him for this moment. It feels like everything I did doesn't count. She looked up at me, her eyes glassy with tears. Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't think it would hurt you this much. It does, I said quietly. It really does. For a while, neither of us spoke. I watched her try to find the words to say something, but she couldn't. I could see her frustration, her guilt, and maybe even a little bit of confusion. I knew Rachel had gotten in her head, planted ideas that made all of this seem perfectly reasonable, but I couldn't tell her that outright. It wouldn't do any good to start a fight about her mother. Finally, Lily broke the silence. I don't know what to do, Dad. I feel like no matter what I choose, someone's going to be hurt. I looked at her carefully, trying to keep my voice steady. You're not going to make everyone happy, Lily. That's just how life works. But there are some decisions that matter more than others. This is one of them. She wiped at her eyes and looked out the window, like she couldn't stand to look at me anymore. I don't want to fight about this, she whispered. Neither do I replied. But I also can't pretend this doesn't hurt. I need you to know that. Lily nodded slowly, still not meeting my eyes. The waitress came back with our food, but neither of us touched it. After a few more minutes of strained silence, Lily looked at me and said, I'll think about it, Dad. I nodded, even though I didn't know what that meant. Okay, I said. We paid the check and walked out to the parking lot together. She hugged me before getting into her car, but it felt different, like something between us had shifted, and I wasn't sure if it could ever go back to the way it was. I watched her drive away, standing there in the cold evening air, my hands shoved into my pockets. I had said my piece, but I still didn't know if she understood. As I got into my truck and sat there for a moment, I realized something that made my chest ache. This wasn't just about the wedding. It was about everything. About years of sacrifice, years of love, years of being the one constant in her life. And now, for the first time, it felt like I was losing her. As I started the engine and pulled away from the diner, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping through my fingers, and no matter what I said or did, I might not be able to stop it. The days after my conversation with Lily felt heavy, like I was dragging something invisible behind me everywhere I went. I couldn't shake the image of her sitting across from me, her eyes downcast, saying she'd think about it. I knew what that meant. It meant she wasn't going to change her mind, and deep down, I think she knew it too. The wedding day was getting closer, and everywhere I turned, people seemed to be talking about it. Friends, neighbors, even guys at the shop. Everyone wanted to know if I was ready for the big day, if I was excited to see Lily walk down the aisle. I'd smile, nod, and mutter something like, yeah, looking forward to it, but inside I was anything but fine. Then the calls from Rachel started. I swear, that woman has a radar for when I'm vulnerable. She'd call, all sugary sweetness, pretending to care. David, she said one evening, her tone dripping with fake concern. I just want to make sure you're okay. Lily told me you two had a talk, and I know this has been hard for you. I gripped the phone, trying not to let my frustration show. I'm fine, Rachel. It's not your concern. She paused for effect, as she always did, before delivering her next jab. Well, I just hope you'll be there for her, David. It would mean so much to her, and I'd hate for her to feel like you're holding a grudge. Holding a grudge. That's what she called it. Not hurt, not betrayal, but a grudge. I'll think about it, I said flatly, and I hung up before she could say anything else. I spent the next few nights pacing the house, replaying everything over and over in my mind. I knew I had to make a choice. I could go to the wedding, sit in the crowd, and watch Mark walk Lily down the aisle while I tried to smile through the pain. Or I could stay home and let everyone call me the bad guy for not showing up. There was no winning here. The night before the wedding, my sister Susan called again. Are you going? She asked, her voice soft but firm. I sighed, leaning back against the couch. I don't think I can do it, Susan. I can't sit there and pretend like it doesn't bother me. I can't watch that moment. She was quiet for a second. You know people are going to talk, right? They'll say you're being petty or stubborn. Let them talk, I said, my voice hardening. They don't know what it feels like. They weren't there. I was. Have you told Lily you're not coming? Not yet, I said. I'll call her in the morning. She deserves to know why I won't be there. Susan let out a slow breath. Just make sure you're doing this for the right reasons, Dave. You don't want to look back and regret it. I won't, I said quietly. The morning of the wedding, I sat at the kitchen table staring at my phone. The clock read 9 a.m., and I knew I couldn't put it off any longer. I dialed Lily's number, my heart pounding in my chest. She picked up on the second ring. Hey, Dad, she said cheerfully, probably caught up in the excitement of the day. Hey, Lily, I replied, my voice steady but heavy. Listen, I need to tell you something. There was a pause on the other end. Okay, what is it? I took a deep breath. I'm not coming to the wedding. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear her breathing, but she didn't say anything for a few seconds. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and shaky. What? Why? Because I can't do it, Lily, I said. I can't sit there and watch someone else take the role that should have been mine. I know you think you're doing what's right, but I can't pretend this doesn't hurt. I can't. Dad, she said softly, I didn't mean to make you feel like this. I never wanted to hurt you. I know you didn't, I replied, but it still feels like I'm being pushed aside, like everything I did for you doesn't matter. I can't sit there and smile through it. I'm sorry. There was another long pause before she whispered, okay? I love you, Lily, I said, my voice breaking a little. I hope you have the beautiful day you deserve. Thanks, Dad, she said quietly. I love you too. We hung up, and I sat there at the table, staring at the phone for a long time. I knew she was hurt, and I hated that, but I also knew I couldn't pretend anymore. That afternoon, I stayed home. I tried to keep busy, mowing the lawn, cleaning the garage, but no matter what I did, my mind drifted back to the wedding. I imagined her walking down the aisle, smiling and glowing in her dress, Mark beside her like he belonged there. My chest tightened at the thought, and I had to stop what I was doing just to breathe. By the time the sun set, the house felt quieter than ever. I sat on the couch with an old photo album, flipping through pictures of Lily growing up. There was one of her at 8 years old, holding my hand as we stood on the porch of our house. She was smiling, her 2 front teeth missing, and I was looking down at her like she was my whole world. Because she was. And even though I wasn't there for her wedding day, I hoped she'd remember that I had been there for everything else.